if you pay attention over a 5 to 10 year period, that the media cycles are beginning to look a lot more polarized across Canada, especially in
Sure.
certain provinces today.
Sure.
So to me, this like what I can control through the platform that I have as an education leader is the degree to which communities can build and nurture and strengthen the relationship that they have with their school systems. Which, if you think about it, Dean, you and I are of a certain age, right? Like it used to be that the main street was a place of gathering. We still have hockey arenas, thank Gord, right? But then we also have malls that are in some type of metamorphosis. We have, you know, online communities and online commerce, and now generative AI, right? Like all of these things that are consuming us and siloing us. So like the real challenge that I see in this work is making learning human and ensuring that
Right.
schools remain hubs for their community.
So I was first introduced to Amos Fodchuk in the fall of 2019. A mutual friend of ours, Bob Dylan, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I work for this guy, Amos Fodchuk, and he's trying to grow his business in Canada, and I think you two would really hit it off." And he was right. We did. We started talking back at that point. And sometimes when you meet someone, you have this immediate synergy and connection. And Amos and I both share a very similar belief and philosophy around education and how we can support educators and leaders. And so that began a relationship that now is in its fourth year, and I'm very pleased to support colleagues here in Canada and also in the US. And that's always been a fascination of mine, that comparison of Canadian and American culture and specifically education. It's something that I think lots of people think about. I get asked a lot about because I've had lots of experience in both countries. And so I wanted to bring Amos on the show to hear his side of that conversation. And he's just got so much experience and knows so many wonderful people in education and has done a lot that he's just sort of that perfect person to have that conversation. So if that's something that you're interested in, that you're curious about, I think you're going to enjoy this conversation with Amos. He's just a very, very smart man, and I always learn a lot from him. So, and again, this podcast is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnerships, of which he is the founder and president of that, and I work under his mentorship. But it's a very, very collaborative effort, no doubt. And I would say, listen, I don't ask people to do this a lot, but like if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or whatever, like if you click subscribe, that'd be really kind of cool to do. And again, if you're not familiar with subscribing, it doesn't mean you owe anything or have any obligation. It just means that when you open up that app, you'll have the latest episodes. And so I'm going to attempt to continue on, maybe not quite at a weekly pace. I think probably moving to bi-weekly, especially over the summer. But I have a number of really, really exciting guests coming up on the show that I'll be excited to share with you. So you don't want to miss them, because I think, I don't know, I find these conversations really, really valuable. I think you will too, and I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Amos Fodchuk. So, Amos, the first thing I want to ask you is, you're a diehard Edmonton Oiler fan living in Carolina Hurricane country, who arguably have been more successful than the Oilers over the years. I still don't quite understand if and how you have any allegiance to the Carolina Hurricanes.
I don't. That's pure and simple. I go to the games so I can uh, sit in the same hollowed hall in which my heart was torn from its chest in 2006. It's a form of returning to the scene of the crime.
So were you there
Sometimes
in
I don't even know there's a
2006?
hockey game going on. Yes, I took what I
Oh,
my
I
best
didn't know
friend.
this.
Yeah, yeah. So my best friend and I, Mark Otter, who lives like zero point 0.8 miles,
And I met him
1.4
last week.
kilometers.
That's kind of cool.
Yes,
That guy,
yes.
who's a Boston
So
Bruins fan,
Mark,
by the way, which is odd.
yeah, yeah, it is. Mark's odd. There's no, don't try to apply logic to emotion. And so he was getting married, and my wedding present to Mark was 2 tickets to the Carolina Hurricanes versus Edmonton Oilers Game 5 Stanley Cup final. Fernando Pisani, overtime winner. Um, it was an amazing game. We were going to do the whole tailgating thing, which for those of you who have never been to a Carolina Hurricanes game, first of all, you need to understand that there are real passionate hockey fans in Carolina. It is amazing to go to these games. These folks are as energetic as anywhere I've ever seen. But the long and the short of it is the rituals that they have before the game are amazing. You can go 6 hours before, and parts of the parking lot look like little urban, thriving metropolises with smoked meats and street hockey and cornhole and all the things. So we were going to do that. It just poured. So we didn't get to do the tailgating, but we did get to celebrate an Oilers win, which in the annals of history means nothing because we lost.
Right, right. Yeah, I actually just recently heard Ryan Smith talking about, because somebody asked him, like, so like, you never won a Stanley Cup, and but you got super super close. Was it better to be close in the end, or was it like, I wish it was too heartbreaking? And I mean, now maybe in hindsight, as a retired NHL, he said, no, I mean, it was an amazing run, and I wouldn't trade it. I obviously wish we would have won, but anyway, that, I mean, I just find it, and that, as you compare not only your, the sort of juxtaposition between being a Canadian and a Canadian hockey fan, and Americans and American hockey. I wanted to talk to
Mm,
you today a little bit about sort of those differences. I'm fascinated between the differences and similarities between these two countries that you and I both serve and have worked in over the years. And people always ask me, especially, both in both countries, how is American education different from Canadian education? And I have
mm,
my own little spiel and thoughts, which, I mean, I preface by saying, I this is what I think. But I'm curious for you, who is a dual citizen, who
mm,
was educated from K to 20 in Canada, but has been, working and living in the US, and that. So let's just
mm.
talk maybe specifically about leadership, since this is the theme of this podcast. Like, what do you see as sort of similarities, and more interestingly, the differences in leadership, in educational leaderships in Canada and the US?
Yeah. Oh, that's a cool question. Well, so yes, I've spent just about half of my life living in Canada as a Canadian, and half my life living in the United States as a dual citizen, a Canadian and an American. I earned my citizenship in 2013, and I've come to love the United States in deep and complementary ways to the way that I continue to love my home, which I still consider to be Canada. And so when it relates to leadership, I'd extend that lens out globally, because I've also worked as an education leader in China and South Korea. I was a learner in for a year in France, and I've traveled to 37 or 38 different countries in my life. And so when it comes to leadership, I think it's much more of a universal competency than it is anything regional or a nationalist, right? Like at the end of the day, a leader carries certain behaviors, knowledge, skills, and the accumulation of those elements is what generates experience. And so I think something that is universal between Canada and the US is a commitment to service, right? We are educators. I've been in education as an educator for 25 years, and I've had different roles over that span. I would consider myself to be an educational leader, just like so many others I have the privilege to work with. And there are very, very few differentiating characteristics between a Canadian and an American leader when they're in a position to exercise their experience and their skill. There are some fundamental differences when constraints arise and restrict leaders from being able to practice
Yeah.
their accumulated experience. And I find that the constraints in the United States are different than the constraints in Canada sometimes. So we can speak to those constraints a little bit if you like, but I
Yeah.
don't see leadership as being inherently Canadian or American.
Yeah.
It's
And
more
no,
around the environmental conditions.
exactly. Yeah. I don't think that probably wasn't the greatest question, but I think that's what I was getting to, is more
Mm.
like, what are the cultural difference that, and systemic
Mm.
constraints, if you will, that impact leadership and force or guide them to do things differently. I guess that's maybe the better
Yeah.
way of framing that.
So I think it's predominantly environmental, and it speaks to the rationale for why Advanced Learning Partnerships, this firm that you and I serve through and to communities all across the United States and Canada, like the strategy for having a Canada-based ALP and a US-based ALP is really grounded on and around the acknowledgement that environmental conditions for K-12 systems and post-secondary slash higher education institutions operate under slightly different parameters that have like larger scale implications over time, right? And so the 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 advantage that I see in the United States is that many school systems and school boards are hardwired to take risks, to be innovative, to mobilize resources and accelerate. Now that has a tremendous downside, but there is less of a risk averse mindset in American leadership circles. In Canada, there is this incredible and beautiful strength, which is a much closer and much more intertwined um, fabric between public school systems, local policing, civic and governance at the municipal level, healthcare, like the true components of a full community are more stable and are more interconnected. So the whole rationale for having ALP Canada and ALP USA is to broker connections that help unlock some of the barriers that can happen when a community has more to lose by being innovative and also has more to learn by understanding the intrinsic connections between a school system and its surrounding kind of host community. And so to me, those are the environmental differences, and then leadership plays out inside those
Right.
those spheres. And to me, one of the most powerful and rewarding parts of my educational leadership role and that of my colleagues is that we get to broker connections over multiple years. And when the conditions are right, pairing and unifying multiple communities that have complementary strengths, it's like the purest form of working ourselves out of a job.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, what you were addressing and referencing makes me think about, as broadly speaking, as two different countries with very different histories, uh, that impact who we are and how we operate in so many ways. And that idea of being less risk averse, to me, is predicated on a couple things. Perhaps one is uh, is just Americans' sort of desire to achieve and accelerate, as whether it's sort of from capitalism or however you frame it. But there's just more of a achievement in that sense is just a more part of that culture. But then the second part, which I always find super fascinating, as humble as the reputation we have as Canadians, oh, we're so humble and we're so this or that, whatever that trope is, we are not humble when it comes to education, because we've had a lot of accolades placed upon us from whether it's PISA scores or whomever, that Canadian
Mm-hmm.
education is high. And sometimes we admittedly think, well, we're better than Americans, which is so crazy based on what we normally think of this. But I do think there's a real sense of pride, which makes us more risk averse, right? Because if we're doing things
Mm-hmm.
well, why would we change? And then conversely, in America, like the media and so forth has really been hard on education. Like, it's the idea that education is broken and everything is bad. Like, they're fighting a very much more a stronger PR campaign that often suggests that schools aren't as good as they could be. And so for that, I think probably makes them say, okay, well, how do we get people off our back and show them that we're actually doing good work? So I don't know if that resonates with you at all around like that, the reasons why we are as we are.
Huh. You're gonna get me in trouble, Dean. I don't.
No, 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 no.
Culture war, right? Like, no, but I'm just like, I'll speak as honestly to this question as I will to any others. Like, coming back to traveling and having traveled to countries all over the world, like, I've learned over time and through experience and a lot of reflection that human beings at their essence are universally focused on looking after their families, looking after their communities, and doing the best they can to keep up with an increasingly complex world. So there's that, and then also, just given that we work with hundreds and hundreds of communities at any given point in time, I am so aware of how each community and the relationship it has with its school system is authentic and it's unique, and so the whole Canadian American thing, man, I understand it at its meta level. There are some arguable differences, but some of the most competitive people I know and some of the most talented business leaders that I know are Canadian, and some of the most purpose driven and agile and visionary community leaders that I have the pleasure of serving alongside are working in American communities. And so I would just say that, like, the more you get to know a community, the more you realize how universally connected it is
Right.
to
Sure.
some unifying principles. And the beautiful work lies in the nuance. And so I don't know what the fundamental differences are between Canada and the US. You're right that politically, the pendulum has swung in the United States toward a more self-destructive mindset as it relates to media. But if you pay attention over a 5 to 10 year period, that the media cycles are beginning to look a lot more polarized across Canada, especially in
Sure.
certain provinces today.
Sure.
So to me, this, like, what I can control through the platform that I have as an education leader is the degree to which communities can build and nurture and strengthen the relationship that they have with their school systems. Which, if you think about it, Dean, you and I are of a certain age, right? Like, it used to be that the main street was a place of gathering. We still have hockey arenas, thank Gord, right? But then we also have malls that are in some type of metamorphosis. We have, you know, online communities and online commerce, and now generative AI, right? Like, all of these things that are consuming us and siloing us. So, like, the real challenge that I see in this work is making learning human and ensuring that
Right.
schools remain hubs for their community.
Well, and again, I think it's just a problem with humanity is we tend to emphasize how different we are when in reality, I think what you're speaking to, and I think we both know, is like people are people and they're all trying to
Mhm.
do the same thing, and there's really way, way more similarities than there are differences. And I mean, again, it's for me, it's just like fun to explore some of the differences. But at
Yeah.
the same time, when it comes to the real work, is like, wait, like we have way more in common than we do. So the opportunity, as you pointed out, to work together and learn with from each other is so great. And largely, I think that's the challenge at education. It's largely untapped. Like, we just don't do enough of that cross, district, cross country collaboration. And again, you and I are the beneficiaries of working with so many different people and knowing so many really cool people and saying, like, these people need to talk, these people need to work together
Yes.
because they can build with each other. But thinking about, I wonder if you could share some examples of like specific ways that you feel really proud of ALP and the work they've done to um, to help leaders, specifically help leaders. Like, what are some of the things that you think of when you think of, oh, I'm really proud of the way we help, whether it's a district whatever community,
Yeah.
specifically, and help them move forward?
Yeah. Well, I started my career as a teacher, and I loved every single day of the 10 years that I spent in the high school classroom. I politely declined the invitation to become an administrator because I just loved the intersection of learning at the classroom level between families and kids and schools. And the only reason I left is because I didn't have the political power to make a scaled impact beyond my classroom, my wing, my department, or even my school. And so I left the classroom 14 years ago. Um, I can't believe that it's already been that long, but I still feel like I have one of the most rewarding roles that any educator can have because we work with so many communities, Dean, over multiple years. Like that to me is what I'm most humbled by is the invitation to serve communities for 2, 4, 6, 8, sometimes 10 plus years. And the reason why I think we earn that privilege isn't because we're good at sales, it's because we listen. It's because we accumulate talented people who bring diverse and specialized skills and experiences. And to me, every day that we earn an opportunity to work with a community is the beginning of what could be a really long and purposeful collaboration. So I think that by far is what I'm most proud of. That when I go to some of these communities, I'm invited to stay in the homes of leaders and their families because we've just gotten to know one another. We respect one another, and we're in it for the right reasons. The same thing applies to the people that you and I consider colleagues and friends. It is amazing the people who have chosen to unite with us in service to this mission and vision that we hold. So by far it is the people, it is the communities, and um, it challenges us to continue to learn. It challenges us to um, kind of review our own assumptions about where we are in terms of our own growth. And I just feel like I get to learn every day because of these long-term partnerships that we earn every day.
Can you give a specific? Can you share an example of one of these partnerships? I know you've shared a lot with me, and I love listening to sort of better understanding ALP's history and trajectory in
Yeah,
some districts. So, is there a district that you think about that has us? I mean, they all have maybe a special place in your heart, if you will. But I mean, what you
yeah,
described
they do.
is like who are these people?
Oh my God. Well, I can talk to you about the people. I can't, I mean, there are 50 communities that I could speak as passionately about. Um, I will tell you that just maybe this is recency bias, but I will tell you that some of the collaborations that I'm enjoying the most right now are um, Dr. Monica Merrick and Beth Rail out of Plymouth County Schools in Michigan. Uh, these are exceptional leaders. And I very rarely, when people ask me, like, who do I think is a good leader? I never give one name because leadership is not a solitary
Right. Yeah.
endeavor. And at best, you need a Han Solo to the Chewbacca, right? And I'm not saying that either of those ladies are exceedingly hairy, but I am saying that they are amazing leaders in the sense that Monica is superintendent, Beth Rail is chief academic officer. They are unified around mission, around vision. They they work hard to earn trust across the entire breadth of their community, and they build systems. They build systems, and they build systems that are human, and they're the guardians of those systems. And they build capacity in others. It is an honor to work with those ladies every day. Um, I would also say that Dr. Gina Keller and Dr. Pam Moran out of Virginia. Um, Gina leads a nonprofit called the Commonwealth Learning Partnership. Pam has a long history alongside Gina as a superintendent and now as a national education leader through her own firm, but then also through a regional professional learning association called FASCL. it has been an honor to learn alongside those ladies over the last 5 years to scale professional learning and innovation initiatives across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Um, I would also say that Jason Van Hoekelum and Jake Bula out of Winchester County Schools do ferociously innovative and um, uh, they do incredible work. Jason just earned a state award for his leadership role as a superintendent, and the gentleman who introduced him um, paid him the highest compliment, which is no one cares more for the needs of every child in a community than Jason. And he is ferocious and he is unapologetic for advocating for the needs of all kids through his actions and his deeds. And that to me is just a super quick snapshot of
Yeah.
three leadership duos that I am just such a huge fan of every day. And there are 100 more behind them.
Well, and I love, like, because I, to be honest with you, I never thought of that idea of the duos, right? Like, because nobody, like, you're right, like it's never just one. So I love how you did that. I've personally worked with three of the six people that you mentioned, and now I'm really wanting to know the other three more after you share that. Like,
Well,
but having worked with Beth, the way my interactions with her is I would describe her. We used to have a term when I worked with Discovery called shipper. They ship. In other words, they get stuff done. And with Beth, it's like I've had her do a few things for me, and it's like she ships. And this is a busy woman too. Like, this is not somebody who just
yeah,
has all kinds of time. Like, she's doing this full-time job, and then like she's, can I do this? And she said, I have this window and I can work on this weekend. And then, but she ships, and she ships really good work. So that I can attest to. And then Pam and Gina, who both are quote unquote retired,
they're
they're
dynamos.
yeah, like the way in which they like the relentless vision for their state, like, and just they're great at bringing the right people together, and using their connections to say, like, these people need to be in this room together, these people, like, they've just been so, yeah. I mean, again, my interactions compared to yours are minimal, but, and I mean, I knew Pam before ALP just because she had such a stellar reputation
Same.
as a school leader. But yeah, this is my takeaway from just this conversation already, is this idea of the duos. Who's your duo? So, like, I don't know that people can really, yeah, like, and I mean, it's not that people don't give that credit, but I mean, it's the kind of work that it's pretty tough to be a one man or a one woman show doing this work.
Can't.
So that's
You
that's
can't.
awesome. So,
Can't.
last sort of serious question, if you will. Not that the others are serious, but how, how have you seen education leadership change over the years? Like, and what do you think the future is like? You started this work 14 years ago, and again, and I'm sure a lot of it hasn't changed. It's the same stuff. It doesn't matter. But I don't know, maybe there's something that is different today than you saw 10 years ago, or things you're thinking about the future that's maybe different.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is a soapbox, so I'll keep my answer very brief. I think the foremost challenge that every educational leader has, and I consider myself to be as much an educational leader today as I did when I was in my seventh year of being a classroom educator. Like, there is no difference. The leadership is competency based. It is not driven by role. And so um, I without sounding overly dramatic, um, technological innovation is by far and has been for a long time outpacing our capacity as a society to maintain a rich balance between culture, democratic guardrails, economic systems, and global relationships. And I think that policy can only do so much. And I think that policy is really important, and we need to expect more from our elected leaders. Um, but I think that education more than ever, and educational leadership more than ever, is a binding agent that is critical to keeping communities together around higher order outcomes. And so, if if anyone is thinking about education as a profession, whether they're in their teens, their 20s, or their 50s, we need you if you're willing to sign on to be that binding agent and to be that um, to be that magnetic force that can help people see the similarities they have and move together with heavy weight on their shoulders to create hubs and communities in between communities. So that that to me is the greatest opportunity that I've seen in my career right now. There's more opportunities to be a true binding agent, to be a true magnetic force in education. So get over here. We need you. And you don't have to look like an educator to gain entrance. You have to ultimately strive to become an educator once you get here. But that there are more ways, Dean, of being an educational leader to being a
Yeah.
magnetic force if you're in service to the right ideas, right? If you're focused on continuing to be that hub that the key pillars of a democratic society need, that you can call yourself anything you want. There are so many different ways of being able to serve now, and to me, that's what makes education the most exciting career destination that anyone can have if they really reflect on it.
Well, that's a great pitch, and I know, just from our internal conversations, as we think about, the impact that AI is having, will have. I mean, it's complex. It's a lot, but at the same time, this is how do we maintain the humanness of this work? I mean, and people that do that figure out how to make this a human endeavor, and let the technology work for us, be supportive in the role, but overall, it's a people, kind of, that's all it is. And it's interesting, as you say that, my mind goes to the fact that, like, all industries, like service industries, like anything that requires like FaceTime, people are having a harder and harder time finding people to fill these roles, because so much of people's choices now are, well, they want to work remotely. They don't want to have to go in an office. And while there's great advantages to that,
Mm.
education is by its nature is like, let's be in a room together and learn and relish in a community. And so
Yeah,
leaders who sort of embrace, like, that's what we do, like, we will be the best at that experience and make it great for the adults, for the kids, for everybody, that this is the place that I'm, want to be at. Like, that to me is like, if you can get that, like, you win, like, you've done your job. But like, as you said,
yeah,
there's competing things that are making that more challenging today than it was certainly 20 years ago.
yeah,
But that's
yeah.
that's the work.
It is, and I love being in rooms with people. And I'm an extrovert, not everybody is, but I also like the to me the power is in the connection, and once you've earned that connection, then using technology becomes an
Yeah,
absolute force multiplier. But
right.
doing it before the connection or with too far a distance between the connection, it's just, we're social beings. We need to be together. And honestly, technology understands that, and in some ways it 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 exploits that if it's not checked properly. And that to me is part of the role we play too in helping communities understand the purpose behind learning and how to use tools that accentuate it, not the other way around.
Well, and I just yesterday I was on a chatting with a teacher from Rochester. One of our projects we're working on with, we're calling them innovative accelerators, and she shared with me a video that they'd created for this. They call it the Zone, and there was just a statement that one kid made in there. It was like, because these are kids that I think maybe school doesn't typically work for them, and so they're trying to create a little bit of an innovative environment for them to thrive. And this kid said, like, I now have to think about, like, I don't want to miss school because I want to make sure I get to, that's called the zone. I want to be there. Like, it just was like,
Yeah, that's
that's
awesome.
just so cool when a kid says, like, I don't have to go to school, but I want to. Like, I want to be with these people. And I just, I told her afterwards, I said, like, you, like, that's there's a measure there that just goes beyond so many metrics we have, that says, like, you have a kid who's just saying, I need to be in this place with these people. Like, what more do you want? Like, it's
That's
just,
right.
it was so
That's
great.
right.
Anyway, well, this has been awesome. And again, I always learn, Amos, we talk on a regular basis, so I always learn from you. I'm just glad I could share this with the broader community. But before we go, couple of bit more rapid fire questions. So give me a book
Okay.
or a podcast that you're currently consuming.
Okay. Well, the book that I'm consuming right now is right in front of me. I love podcasts, but I'll
Hold
be
it up.
brief. Yeah. So this here
Oh,
is one of those. It's one of those little renegade books that I don't even know who it's published by. It's barely held together. My friend Mark, that I already spoke to, gave me this book, and I should probably give it back to him because he gave it to me 6 months ago. But I've easily read it 4 times in that period, and it really just the name of the book is Systems Convening: A Crucial Form of Leadership in the 21st Century, and it's just like this pervasive, like
wow.
it's just a little countercultural, revolutionary uh, cri de coeur around how to not just activate communities, but to connect them and harness them and then get out of their way. So that's a book I'm loving. Recommend it if you can even get your hands on it. That's a beauty.
Oh, yeah. It looks like it might not be. Anyway, so can I expense it then if I find it?
Heck yes, you can. Absolutely, you'd
Okay.
love this book, Dean.
Okay, I think so. I think so. What about just for fun, a series or a movie that you recently watched, or like a Netflix series that you're binging or binged recently?
So Everywhere, Everything, All at Once, the Academy Award winner
Okay.
from last year, that has blown my mind. Katie and the kids and I watched it a little while ago. I have not stopped thinking about it. Just the whole like existential, multi-tiered universe concept mixed with just hilarious absurdism. I just love that crap.
And finally, like I said, I was just in Chapel Hill. Saw lots of cool stuff there. It's a beautiful part of the country. But
Yeah.
if visitors coming to St. Paul and they said, like, give me a place that if I Googled it might not come up, but I probably should go there or visit. What do you recommend?
St. Paul. So I will give you a twofer. So if you
So
ever
this is
come
for
to
both. So it's Chapel Hill
both,
first,
okay.
and then also
Ah,
St. Paul, Alberta. So you got to give me
okay,
two
fine.
places.
Okay, fine. So in Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh. So where I live is in they call it the Triangle. So um, there's an amazing seafood restaurant, but it's a shack. It's called Salt Box. Ricky Moore is this amazing African American chef who's just lived, eaten, and breathed seafood and just culinary culture. And he's a James Beard Michelin awarded. Like he is exceptional. That food is ridiculous, and you'd drive past it like it was a gas station, but that place is amazing. So there's that.
Okay.
Um, I grew up in St. Paul, Alberta, not Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a small community in rural Alberta. Um, I mean, the UFO landing pad, yeah, on Main Street, it's been beaten to death. But if you want to come to St. Paul, you're going to see the world's only UFO landing pad. In the 80s, the St. Paul mayor got more money from someone to build a tourist uh, office that is in the shape of a UFO. So if you want kitsch, come on to St. Paul. You got it.
Oh, love it. Well, I definitely will put the seafood place on my list of next things to visit next time I'm in your part of the world. So anyway,
It's
hey,
ludicrous. So good.
thank you for this. This was awesome. I've been wanting to have you on, but this is when it worked out, and so I'm glad. And I learned from it. So if anybody else learns, that's just bonus. But I already learned, so I'm good. So
We had
thanks.
fun. That's all that
We
matters,
did.
Dean.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
You good?